I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Viva. It's really terrific to be here.
And we just started chatting about that we kind of are on a similar mission of helping people, hopefully helping others design a career and life of their dreams. I guess for the lack of a better word, it might sound a little cliche, but would you like to share anything else about kind of your current mission and what you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, so I'm Ashley Jablow. I am a coach, a facilitator, and really a guide for people who are eager to design careers and lives that they love. It's funny because I think I've always been guided myself by trying to answer the question, who do I want to be when I grow up? And it wasn't actually until I got a bit older and I enrolled in coaches training that I realized not everybody is guided by that question. That in fact, not everyone wants to go right into the deep end of the pool around purpose and authenticity and meaning and alignment. And that certainly that's okay. Like not everybody has to be driven by that question. But for me, that's really the North Star. Who am I becoming? And then who am I becoming in service of helping other people become their most authentic self? So much of my career has been around growing into myself for the sake of helping other people grow into themselves.
Love it. Some of the words and phrases you were using just like resonates because some years ago I was giving presentations about your North Star and designing it and what it is and how to get there. So it's beautiful kind of what you're saying. So it sounds like it was your own journey.
It was absolutely my own journey that got me to the point that I'm in right now. And it's like we were talking about earlier, sort of sitting in the center of a lot of different contexts and situations and conversations. And I certainly would have never expected, 15, 20 years ago when I started my career that I'd be standing here today talking to you about life design and about what it looks like to create a life that you love. I grew up very ambitious, very sort of perfectionist tending, right? Wanting to be the best, do the best. Um, you know, I'm so grateful I grew up in the heart of Silicon Valley, just as it was really becoming Silicon Valley. And that imprinted on me, I think, a lot of healthy drive and even a competitive spirit to achieve and to strive. And at the same time, I also learned a lot about feeling like I didn't fit and feeling like I couldn't compete or like I was very behind. And so the early part of my career, in many ways, is a collection of being in a lot of different situations, a lot of different conversations, even a lot of different industries and fields to try to find where I fit. And ultimately, what I learned after many twists and turns and some really incredible jobs and some really tough situations, including getting laid off, what I learned was that the best opportunity for me was actually to create my own opportunity rather than trying to find where I would fit, like that idea of the square peg in the round hole. I decided to create my own shape, right? And in the process of that, I've learned so much about helping other people do that because I really come to believe that each of us, when we can step into the most authentic expression of who we are, that is giving to the world. That is being of service. That is shining brightly so that other people can shine. And so that's really what my mission is now is to take the story of my own twists and turns and to share how I have figured it out, quote unquote, how I'm still figuring it out, and to use that as an opportunity to guide other people to do that in their own way too.
I love that. I'm loving this conversation. I'm like, all the things you mentioned, I'm like, let's ask about this or let's go down this rabbit hole.
See,
And it's
I
like,
knew
what?
we were going to be friends. I knew we were going to be friends.
Amazing. I love it. And how old were you when this question started bubbling up?
Yeah, that's interesting. So, my mom likes to tell a story of a day when she came to pick me up from kindergarten. So, when I was 5 or 6, right? And she tells this story of watching me on the playground with all my friends and assigning jobs for each of them. So it was like a make believe. You're going to be the prince. You're going to be the evil villain. And of course, I think I turned myself into the princess or the queen or whatever that was, right? But the idea being that I have always been guiding, I have always been facilitating, I've always been coordinating how we gather and how we work together. And I think that was probably the earliest expression of this idea of everybody gets to play their own part. Everybody gets to show up in their wholeness and be themselves. And let's find a place for everyone. Right. So, I mean, if you ask my mom, she'd probably say that moment on the playground. I think the question has gotten more refined over the years, right? It wasn't until I found coaching that I started to realize the questions I ask are really about purpose and meaning. And it wasn't until I got laid off, which was about 8 years ago, that I really started asking questions about how do I create work for myself that not only is a full expression of who I am and my unique gifts, but that also is respectful and sustainable for the life that I'm living. Because I think there are a lot of realities of just life, right? And so, yeah, again, the question has evolved, but it's kind of always been within me around where are we going? How are we getting there? How can we all do it together? Um, and just kind of bringing out everyone's unique light and authentic shine to the world, I
Game of
guess.
life.
Yeah, the game of life. Exactly, exactly.
Wow, I love that. And, in retrospect, of course, in hindsight, it's like makes so much sense, when you tell that story. It's like, of course, coaching, career coaching, like it's like a no-brainer, but you still have to go through these trials, through the beta testing. I call it beta testing, and I feel like this is not talked enough, that we just expect to put this puzzle together and know all the pieces. But even there's this in between, right? You on the playground and you doing coaching right now. And like you said, you did these things in between.
Yes, I mean, I've done a lot of things and not all of them had much to do with designing your life. Well, I'll be totally honest. I mean, I started my career in the nonprofit sector. I think I've always been very mission driven and wanted to have impact, so that made the most sense at the time. I went to business school well, because I thought I needed a degree. I thought I needed to be more serious and more professional. I wish I had known how much math I was going to have to do in business school, but I did go to business school. I got a job at a very well known design and innovation firm. So I worked essentially in corporate consulting for many years. I got a job at the White House, then working in the federal government and technology. The most recent organization I worked with was a Spanish design firm, and I worked to open up their first US office in Washington, D.C. So I've had a very eclectic career, and for a very long time, I felt as though that was a negative. I interpreted that, or the story I told myself was that it meant I wasn't serious, or it meant that I couldn't find my place, or like what was wrong with me that I keep kind of bouncing around.
Yep.
And it wasn't, again, until I got laid off and I started doing some really serious reflection and understanding about myself, and kind of, like you said, looking backwards and saying, what is the through line here? What has this all been about? That I realized, actually, again, to your point of beta testing, I had been experimenting. I had been trying out different places and, again, conversations to see what fits. And it was actually because I had hopscotched so many times that I was then able to have a really unique perspective on on the conversations I wanted to have. Right. So it didn't necessarily make sense at the time, but again, looking back on it, all those different places I found myself in are now informing my perspective from where I sit.
I love that because I think I can relate, and I know there will be others that will be able to relate, especially if you're searching, kind of what's modeled for us is this one straight line career, right? Like I was in um talent acquisition, right? And it goes from whatever entry level junior individual contributor to senior individual contributor to team leadership, right? So you're climbing this upwards trajectory, and that is success, right? And you look around, and that is success, right? And if when you start searching, because if you feel like there is that feeling of something missing, right, you're kind of checking more boxes on the outside than the inside, then if you do something about it, it leads you on this journey of searching, right? Of piecing and gathering these puzzle pieces and playing with them and arranging them, and you can conceptualize all you want. At least my experience has been that it's still not the same until you actually do it. The idea might seem good, right? It might make sense on the paper, but you have to try things on, and the only way to try things on is doing it, and then you feel, and many things will not work out or will not be the thing. And I feel like we have this expectation that, okay, we have to pick the perfect thing, and we don't talk
Mhm.
enough about this trial and error, beta testing, call it what you will, and that so many people then feel like losers.
Yeah, yeah.
I can
It's
relate to
it's
this.
so fascinating, and I love that this is the direction we're going in, because I get to give another shout out to my amazing mom, Janice. She's taught me many, many life lessons. And one of the things she always said to me when I was growing up, and that I now try to share with as many people as possible, because I just think it embodies, encapsulates what you were just saying. She has always said, Ashley, you have to get on the bus. You can always change your seat later, right? But the idea of, you have to get into motion, you have to get going. And, to extend the bus analogy, right? Once you're on the bus, you can start to say, where do I want to get off? Or, did I get on the wrong bus? Do I need to turn around? Or, there's a transfer coming up, right? But sometimes, and this is so, I'm not saying it's easy, especially for people who are high achievers, for perfectionists. To your point about, there's this ladder I need to climb, and everyone says that's what I should want to do. There's a lot of pressure to get on the right bus and to stay on it all the way to the end of the line. And the notion that actually I just have to get started, I just have to try one thing, I have to make one decision, and it doesn't have to be the perfect decision. In fact, I should expect that it won't be the perfect decision. But the way I always think about taking action is that it's in service of learning, right? It's in service of learning. Do I like this? Is this right for me? Does this make me feel good? Is this, really tactical stuff? Does this fit with my schedule or my family responsibilities? How do I feel making this choice? And once you've taken that action, once you've started to learn, then you can refine what your plan is so that you know your next step, the next bus you want to get on, right? But it's amazing how it's so counterintuitive. We put so much pressure on, it's got to be the right decision, it's got to be the right next step. And actually, the way you get to what's truly right for you is by trying something, because you learn and you reduce the risk ultimately in where you're going, right? You build more confidence in this is the right path. But it's only because you have to do the thing that doesn't make any sense and that feels super unsafe and, kind of dangerous. You got to take action.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, your mom was a wise woman.
She's a very wise woman, and I'm sure she will listen to this, so we should all say hi to Janice.
Yes, it's amazing to have, support and encouragement and clarity and kind of this reinforcement, such a guidance
Yeah.
on the path, because it's not, you see, it's not for the faint of heart. So when did you become kind of more conscious about, okay, I want to design my own work, and how
Yeah.
did it look like?
Yeah. Well, okay. So maybe if we transport ourselves back to 2016, I was living in Northern Virginia with my family. I had just finished up a 2-year fellowship with the White House. I was very lucky to work in the Obama administration, and my job title literally had the word presidential in it. So there was this feeling of, I'm at the pinnacle, I'm at the peak, like I have arrived. And it was great for my ego. I also knew under the surface that I was very confused about what was going to come next. I was very confused about how do I go forward from here. I started working with a coach, my very first coach, and to say that it was a transformational experience is actually like an understatement. My first coach and my first coaching experience was really groundbreaking for me, because it was probably the first time I had ever stopped to actually ask myself some curious and powerful questions about me and about what do I want for my life and all of that. So I worked with my coach. I landed what I thought was my dream job, like capital D, capital J, really. And then just about 10 months later, got unexpectedly laid off. Now, I had been unemployed before, by my own volition, like I'm going to take a break and transition. But I'd never been unintentionally laid off. Like I'd never been unintentionally unemployed. And that also was a huge blow to my ego. I remember I used to take a lot of walks to just like clear my head and try to make sense of, like, how am I ever going to tell anybody about what happened? I was mortified, and I was just very lost. And it was around that time, when you get laid off, you immediately go into grieving and survival, right? So I was applying to jobs, and I was taking a lot of walks, and I was updating my resume and taking a lot of walks. And what occurred to me in that season, again, this was like summer of 2017, was that I had been working in innovation. I had been working with teams and organizations to help them come up with new ideas for programs, services, products, in service of whatever their goals were. And I realized that those same methods and mindsets that I had been teaching for a number of years, that I had been practicing for so many years, were actually the same methods and mindsets that I could use to redesign my career. And in a funny way, I realized I am my own user here. I am the test subject. So if I have these tools in my toolkit, what would it look like to turn them on myself? So I created in the summer of 2017 what I called a 60-day sprint to redesign my life.
So wait, this is that design design thinking.
Yes,
Oh,
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I had been working and again teaching design thinking for many years. But the thought of how to begin to use those methods to redesign my career felt novel to me. And so I thought, well, just like we said, I'll experiment with this. Now, I love to mention that, of course, as the expression goes, we make plans and the universe laughs, right? So I thought, oh, 60 days is plenty of time for me to completely redesign my entire professional and personal life. Okay,
to be
so
successful at the end.
yeah, yeah. I mean, 60 days plus another 8 years plus another lifetime, and I've probably figured it out, right? But at the time, I set out to really work through these 4 steps that I had been practicing and using in my professional work for many years. And again, to turn them kind of on myself and say, well, how would I do this for me and for what I want my next job to be? Now, again, it's still ongoing, right? And it is actually the basis of what I do with my clients and in my courses and things like that, helping people learn and apply these 4 steps. But that, to answer your question, that was really when I started being curious about intentionally and creatively approaching my life like my greatest design project, my most important design project.
I love that. That resonates. And isn't it?
It is, absolutely. Absolutely. And we get so busy and we get so distracted. And I just, one of my biggest kind of personal projects right now is learning how to slow myself down and learning how to cut out the noise, especially with the news cycle and politics and parenting and all the things, climate, and I really am trying to focus on taking my own medicine. That this is my most important design project, who I am becoming in service of the world that I want to create. It does require intention and creativity and curiosity. And so I'm always trying to, again, I guess, sort of turn that inward on myself and really be thoughtful about how I live so that I can help other people do the same.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing it. Any one of us, I think, can relate wanting to design, right, something that is right for us. And you're in a job, you might be laid off because I think it's a very current conversation in this climate in the last 2, 3 years. There just have been layoff after a layoff. Um, where where do we start?
It's a great question. It's a big question. And it's also, in some ways, kind of a simple answer that I can give because I don't think that this is rocket science. I think a lot of us come into this notion of designing our lives starting with feeling like we're stuck, right? A lot of the catalyst for I need to do something different or I want to live differently or work differently is because we start with feeling stuck, like we're not, whether it's I've just been laid off and I don't know what to do about it, or I'm feeling unfulfilled in my career and I'm not sure what the problem is or what to do next. And it's really interesting because there are lots of reasons for why we get stuck and lots of traps that keep us stuck. One that I think you'll probably appreciate is the idea that we tend to think that being stuck is a thinking problem. Like, if I can just think hard enough on this, I'll get the answer, like taking a math test, right? I just need to think on this a lot more and the answer will come to me. But as I'm sure you know from your movement practice and all the other work that you do, it's not just a thinking problem to get ourselves unstuck. It's a learning problem. It's a curiosity problem. It's an action problem, as we've talked about, right? So a lot of what I coach people to do, again, it's not complicated, but it's to get out of just thinking about this and instead to do 4 things. So the first that I think is really important is to discover or maybe rediscover who you are today. So that's really a curiosity act, if you will. That's a thoughtful way of starting to reflect on and even learn, like, what are my strengths? What do I love? What lights me up? Who am I becoming? Like we were talking about, right? So many of us have stories about ourselves that we created 20 years ago when we chose a major in college. So who are you today, and how does that story need to be updated, right? So that's the first kind of thing I want people to think about, is to discover and to be really intentional about discovering and understanding themselves today. And the second thing I think that is really crucial and we often skip over because it takes a little bit of hard work is defining what really matters. Defining our point of view, whether that's about what success means to me or about what I really honestly need in my next job for it to work, or even about what are my values right now. Right? I think our values can ebb and flow and we can prioritize different things in different seasons of our lives. So pausing to really define, where am I right now in this season and what are my priorities going forward? The third thing, and this one is often really overlooked as well, is to imagine, right? To reconnect with 5-year-old Ashley on the playground and say, if I had a magic wand and I could create any future scenario for myself, what would it look like? To dream, to vision, to play, to be in color, right? Imagining is such an important step that we often just think is for the little kids in school. But really, it's so important to be able to connect with that future vision that we're holding. And then the last one is very present in this conversation already. I call it iterate. So the idea that instead of taking really radical or drastic action, instead of ripping off the Band-Aid, the way that we design careers and lives that we love comes through intentional, incremental, consistent action that we take every day. So instead of saying, I need to quit my job today because I just can't take it one more minute, the question really is, what is the smallest, fastest, cheapest thing that I could try today that's going to help me learn more about where I'm going? So that's how people get started.
This is the whole program. I mean, that just question one is a huge
Yes.
thing. It's like, and it kind of ties into this. I think authenticity can be really hard. I mean, it's a huge buzzword, but like to rediscover, or many times even discover who you are,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it goes hand in hand. And I think it's good. Like that's why where the authenticity conversation is good if you know who you are, or is a trap if it's like just like conceived notions, ideas, but you're still in this deep alchemy of discovering and coming home to yourself.
Yeah, it is a lifelong process.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of it starts with practicing being honest with ourselves. And this is something that I know it has been somewhat of a bitter pill to swallow at different points in my career and in my, my broader life. But again, back to this is our most important project, growing into our most authentic selves, it really needs to begin with taking an honest look at where things stand right now, rather than turning away from this is my current reality, or I'm not going to pay attention to it, or I'm going to avoid it. But if we can turn towards it and say, even if, and I love this caveat, because being honest with yourself doesn't mean you need to immediately be honest with your 500 Facebook friends about where things stand in your life, right? It doesn't even mean you need to be honest with your partner or your best friend or whoever it might be. Being honest starts with you sitting with a piece of paper or with a voice memo on your phone, or just letting your thoughts be thoughts and starting to really unpack what's actually working in my life and what's actually not, and just naming it. It sounds even simple just doing that, and I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's really hard. I know it can make us feel really squeamish, but I really believe that we're not going to get to the end result of living a life that's authentic to each of us if we can't start with being honest about, again, what's working and what's not.
And I think what a lot of people can find themselves, let's say there's a scenario, it goes together kind of with this, which you talked about being stuck, whether you feel stuck or not, but it is kind of some sort of a stuckness, right? Where you're experiencing, you've had a career somewhere 7, 10, 15 years, 20 years, um, and you know what's working, meaning that the money is working, right? You can provide for your family, which is no small thing, right? And you have this external success and these external measures that are working, but then inside you have this unquantifiable feeling that something's missing, right? Like, and then it like something's off. Yes, you kind of feel like ties into career and technicolor versus living in black and white, right? You're kind of starting to feel like you're living. The light inside of you is like getting smaller
Dimming.
and smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling you don't feel that aliveness inside of you, right? To an extent. So, and when you say naming what's working, so what's working is kind of like it's working in this 3D reality, right? But at the same time, you don't know what's not working and what would work.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting because I think a lot of the people that I work with, particularly women, they come to me almost, if you imagine, they're kind of looking right and looking left, kind of looking around themselves and saying, like, is this what it's really supposed to be about? Is this really what I'm doing with my life? To your point about this inner light really dimming, things often look really good on paper, or they look really good to our, again, our Facebook friends, but they don't feel good on the inside. And I think even just starting with an honest naming that I feel misaligned, I notice this disconnect, right? That it's funny. We don't want to name that because it feels scary. It feels squishy. Like, what do I do with that? It's ambiguous. And so it's uncomfortable. But I would actually reframe that and say that the minute you can acknowledge there's misalignment here, that's a minute where you've suddenly gotten new clarity. And clarity is something we all want. We all want to feel like we have direction, like we have a plan, we know where we're going. And you can't really build on that plan until you can name where you're starting.
Is that where you were in 2016?
I mean, I certainly had to take a very honest assessment of, like, I've built this incredible career on paper that has felt very unfulfilling at almost every turn. And, back to the idea of this career ladder, I mean, I climbed it. I was at the peak of what everyone said I should want. And for a really long time, I thought it was what I wanted too. And then having to reconcile getting laid off. Again, that idea of this is how am I ever going to explain this? Again, that I felt like I needed to be honest right away with my world. And I would encourage you, baby steps. You don't have to be honest with everybody. You don't have to disclose this feeling of misalignment or inauthenticity with everyone. Um, and the minute I started to say, well, I could go apply for jobs doing what I was doing before, I could go do that. Or I can acknowledge that what I was doing before actually wasn't lighting me up. It wasn't making me feel alive or integrated or on purpose. And even just that first acknowledgement, that first honest assessment of where I was, helped, I think, maybe embolden me to say, well, let me experiment with what's over here. I still had to pay my bills. I started freelancing. I took contract work. I still had to figure out like the 3D reality of I got to make money. I got to pay my rent. And I also had this really juicy, interesting question to wrangle with around, well, if it's not this over here that I've been doing for all these years, what might it be?
So tell us a little more. How did you create your own opportunity?
It's funny. So, I mean, I never intended to start my own business. This was not on my radar. I really, for a number of reasons, thought the small business owner path, the entrepreneurial path, was not for me. When I got laid off, like I said, I started applying to jobs. I started taking on some contract work, and I also started doing, really, in essence, what I call proving the business model of Ashley. That first year after I got laid off, it was really interesting to me to see what people wanted to pay me to do, and in the beginning, it was stuff that I wasn't necessarily like called to, but again, paying the bills, right? So I started practicing, how do I bring on a new client? How do I invoice them? Like, oh, someone wants me to do usability research for them, for example. I've never done that before, but they seem to want to work with me. So let's try it, right? So the first year of being self employed was really an experiment. What I started to do over time was to see that some of the clients I was taking on were a really good fit and I loved the work, and others, they weren't a great fit. I didn't love the work. I always structured things in short-term projects. As much as that was a little uncomfortable for my bank account, it made it feel more doable. So I was never sort of attached to a new client for more than 3 or 4 months at a time, because I wanted that flexibility to experiment and to see what I liked. And I got into a pattern of about every 6 months, I would take stock. This is the work that I've been doing. What part of this portfolio do I want to keep or maybe even dial up? What part do I want to take out? And what do I want to bring in? And over the years, that portfolio again has evolved and taken new shapes and now looks a lot like, 8 years later, my business now looks a lot like what I was hoping it would look like in 2017, but it's taken me a long time to get there, right? And I often say that running your own business is one of the best personal development journeys you can go on, because I've had to learn a lot about myself. I've had to learn a lot about my values and how to put those into action. But it's been a lot of experimenting. It's been a lot of trying and a lot of dancing with the uncertainty of like, how is it all going to work out?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing, Ashley. How did you, or when and how did it come clear to you that the focus is more on coaching?
Yeah. You know, I I want to say I knew I knew from almost the very beginning that I wanted to be in coaching conversations, about purpose, about authenticity. I also want to say that I didn't really discover that until even a few months ago. Like I've gone in and out of that knowing for a very long time. I have in many ways over the years have had a number of businesses all under the umbrella of my one core business. I've worked with coaching clients one-on-one. I've facilitated big gatherings and events and workshops for organizations. I've taught human-centered design and innovation methods. I've been still experimenting with so many different types of businesses, and it really wasn't probably until maybe a year and a half ago that I didn't necessarily decide that coaching was going to be the thing, but I decided that talking about and teaching and guiding people to design careers and lives that they love was going to be the thing. So I'm still, frankly, figuring out how I'm expressing that in the world. I've recently launched a new project called Life Design School, which is my latest iteration of how do I bring this conversation to people. So it's been a through line, and also sometimes I kind of wake up and I'm like, oh, what a great idea. I should help people design careers and lives that they love. Like it feels new to me sometimes still. And I think it's ever since I started my business, it's really been the core of what I wanted to talk about and what I wanted to bring to people.
I love that. I can so appreciate that. And I think so many people yearn for it. And what came to me was also, it's interesting also in the, I think that conversation was very much alive like a couple years ago. I think it's still on people's hearts, but now kind of the job market in some ways has changed so much that people almost feel like it's a luxury to ask that question.
Mm-hmm. It's a luxury, and also it's possibly, like we said, the most important and urgent question to be asking yourself. I mean, it does when there are like literal places around the world that are on fire, right? Wars and famine and all of it. It feels self-indulgent sometimes. It may even feel selfish or reckless to be, wait, I need a timeout. I need to discover who I am at this stage of my life. And again, I go back to if and when you can step into your most authentic expression of who you are, and you can put that awareness of yourself into the work that you do. And when I say work, I mean career for sure, but I mean how you show up for your family, how you participate in your community, just how you spend your money, right? When you can, it's funny, it gives me goosebumps. When you can really know who you are and express that fully and openly and creatively, I believe that's how the world gets better, right? I believe that's how we create the world that we all want to be part of and live in. So, yeah, sometimes it can feel like I don't have time for this. And also, we have to make time for this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Exactly. That's a lie, right? That's a being on the wheel of busyness.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But really, if you think about it, what is the most important thing? Because from that, everything else, it's kind of like from the inside out versus from the outside in.
Mhm.
And what came to me, because before we started recording, we were talking about having kids. My son is in high school, your son, it sounds like in middle school.
Mhm, mhm,
And I was thinking about how can we have kids and people overall that step into their purpose and know their purpose and are clear in their purpose sooner, right, than in their 40s or 30s. Like, what is that thing that can help us get, ironically, to our own core quicker?
Gosh, Baiba, if you can figure out how to do that, I mean, sign me up. How much does it cost? Right? I mean, I think about this a lot as a parent because I wish that I could impart all of my lessons and all of my wisdom, into my son, probably the way that my parents and my grandparents wish they could have imparted all of it into me, right? It's funny because a lot of the work that I do involves methods and frameworks and hands-on activities to help people get clarity. And I have tried using some of these with my son, like over dinner. Like, let's, if you're familiar with one called Rose Thorn Bud, like, what was good today, what was hard today, what are you excited about for tomorrow? And I swear, he'll look at me like, hands on hips, basically, Mom, I know what you're doing.
Exactly.
Right. And so I wish there was a way that I could just port everything I know and into his brain and like help him leapfrog over the challenges and the cultural conditioning that we all, are imprinted with. And I also think it's probably very universally human to kind of pick your head up again in middle life and look around and say, where am I going? So I wish I could insulate him and protect him and accelerate him. And also sometimes I'm just like, this is not my lesson to teach. This is his lesson to learn.
And I think that, so we are kindred spirits in walking. I think sometimes walking is the best medicine and gives you
Mm.
more answers than any of these frameworks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I went for a walk this morning and it doesn't even, I could just walk in a circle. Just the movement is so important and the fresh air is so important. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Mm, I love that. I could talk to you forever, but tell us, Ashley, how can we find you, connect with you, and get more of you?
Yeah, oh, I appreciate that. I know, I feel like we could keep going. So I would love to connect with your listeners. Always on LinkedIn and Instagram in particular. So I'm Ashley Jablow on those platforms. And one of my favorite resources to share is actually something called the Clarity Kit. It is a free workshop that helps people who are feeling stuck. Again, whether it's in work or another aspect of your life, it walks you through these 4 steps again: discover, define, imagine, and iterate. And then we do a hands on activity together to help you get immediate clarity so you can move forward. So that is at lifedesignschool.co/kit. It's called the Clarity Kit. It's totally free, and I would welcome people to give it a try. It's a great way to just spend half an hour with me and learn more about life design.
I love it. That's beautiful. And you can find it in the show notes and just click and navigate to it. I definitely would encourage anyone who's on the seeking and purpose chasing journey, who has the questions and kind of feels that deeper stirring. That sounds like a beautiful offer. So thank you so much, Ashley. Don't we all need a little more clarity? I love that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. This has been so much fun.
Thank you for playing. Anything that you want to end with that I didn't ask?
Keep going, I guess, those are the words that come to mind. Keep going. And it's probably a reminder for me today, as much as it is for everyone else, that, the journey to create a life that we love and a career in Technicolor is winding, and it's not always linear, as we've talked about. And so keep going, keep believing that it's possible, keep taking small incremental action towards that vision that you're holding. And just know that even though a lot of people don't talk about this, we are all on parallel paths together, and that it can feel incredibly lonely, but know there's a community around you. There are other seekers who are looking to design careers and lives that they love. So keep going.
Thank you so much. This was phenomenal. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Viva.